All right, welcome into another episode of the Ryan and Goodman podcast. I'm Jeff Goodman. He is Bob Ryan, and we are pleased to be joined by another Bostonian, or guy who at least covers the Boston Celtics, and that is none other than the Athletics' Jay King. And Jay, appreciate you joining us. Appreciate you showering, dressing up. This is the best I've seen you look in, well, since we've known each other.
I lost some weight during the pandemic. I mean, that's not too much weight, but I occasionally shower sometimes. I put on clothes. I'm a sweats guy anyway, so this hasn't changed my habits too much.
It definitely has not. It definitely has not. All right, we figured now is the time. Now is the time to get you on. We've been waiting, and I think the panic button can be pushed right now for the Boston Celtics. I'm getting it from a bunch of my buddies. You know, Brad Stevens should be gone. Like, it's crazy now. I mean, it is crazy. Bob and I have defended Brad Stevens, and we can get to Brad Stevens in the future here. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I guess the big thing with the Celtics being 500, coming off a loss to Atlanta, coming off a terrible week last week, losing to two kind of garbage teams. I mean, let's face it, Detroit and Washington stink. And you
make it 3 Atlanta.
Yeah. I mean, it's been bad. I mean, luckily they're in the East. Otherwise, they'd be in 10th place right now. What is wrong? Put your finger on the biggest issue right now affecting the Boston Celtics and why they have been mediocre.
The biggest issue is a lack of talent around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And those guys have been spectacular most of the season. Obviously, they've been in and out of the lineup too. This is an injured lineup. The top 4 guys that they've basically built everything around now have played together for 28 minutes all season. And yeah, you look around the league and COVID has been something that teams have had to deal with. Injuries have been something that teams have had to deal with. This Celtics team is not built to survive and thrive when some of their best players are injured. They just don't have that type of depth. You look at the 2 signings they made after Gordon Hayward left. Tristan Thompson has looked like a piece that they don't really need because Robert Williams has emerged and Daniel Tice has been solid. Yep. And Jeff Teague has given them nothing. And
he looks old. He just looks old, Jay. He looks old.
Yeah. So the 2 guys that they signed in wake of Hayward haven't helped at all. They've been very fortunate that Peyton Pritchard has been good. He's one of their only bench guys who's given them anything. And so I just think when you look at that roster, there's not much shooting, there's not much playmaking around Tatum and Brown, and they just have to do a lot of everything. And then I think silently, one of their killers has been they don't have the defensive versatility that they've kind of had so much of in spades the last few years. They lost a lot of that. Their bench is now point guards and centers, and it's tough to win in the modern NBA when you can't do as much switching as you want to, and you don't have the pieces that are long and athletic that most teams need to have.
Yeah, the injury thing, obviously you can't look for sympathy because, quote, everybody has and understand that. But I've just decided that to lay back and say, they're not whole. You made that point, 28 minutes with the group,
Yeah.
That group, because we don't know how good we still, it's very uncertain as to what Kemba will ever be again.
Right? Yeah, I didn't even mention that. That's
very uncertain, so that scares you. All the assumptions about were based on the most optimistic projection of availability of their supposedly good players, and Kemba hasn't given them very much at all. And now we're going on 3 weeks with an uncertain return for Marcus Smart. And by the way, if anybody doubted his importance to this team, I hope that they've revised their opinion.
Bob is the president of the Marcus Smart fan club.
Yeah,
if you didn't know that yet.
I'm the chief defender of the defender.
Mr. Winning Place.
Yeah. I understand the ire of people. I'm watching the Twitter. I see it. I'm here. I understand the ire. I'm not one of those people because I'm trying to be realistic about what their components are. It's a word I like to use, and you've identified it very well. They don't have the components that we thought they were going to have, or that they need to be much better, much better than they are. Every once in a while, you're going to have a night like Ojale pops out of the sky, drops in the big game that night, you win a game against a team missing a lot of players, by the way, right? Denver was depleted. Yep. So, you have to put a little asterisk on that one. I'm not upset. I'm disappointed. Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan still. That's all I am now. I'm a fan, but I'm not angry because I'm giving them some outs here. I didn't anticipate that Teague would be so useless. I thought that was a good pickup, And you're right, there, but for Pritchard, oh my God, because and there's a little bit of a glimmer. Before the year is over, I'm going to just shout it out that Nesmith will be of a consistently useful, he'll be consistently useful. He's starting, how about the fact that his first initial value was turned out to be on the defensive end rather than the offensive end? Who saw that?
That's a stunner.
Who saw that coming? But all right, anyway, no, I think you identified it very well. You mentioned one other guy I'm intrigued with, and that is Robert Williams. I'm wondering what the ceiling is. Because, boy, there was some wonderful athleticism there. Adam Himmelsbach had a funny tweet during the course of the game last night. If they could just throw the ball that lobs to him all night, the world would be great, But he has, look, you can see what they saw in him, right, Jay?
Absolutely. Yeah, and he's a guy that his ceiling, like you said, is so high. And I think if he can reach that more regularly, it's a big deal. I think the reason why they haven't committed to giving him more minutes, and probably the reason why they felt compelled to go after Tristan Thompson, is he just makes those mistakes. And you see it defensively, he'll be in the wrong place. Sometimes he'll catch a rebound and just throw an outlet pass to the wrong team. And I imagine as a coaching staff, that's very frustrating. But they know they need to coax him along. I'm honestly interested to see whether at the trade deadline they think about moving Tristan Thompson and think about using his contract in a trade, because to me they obviously need wings, they need shooting, right. They need help there, and you don't need a third center. Like no.
You said it. You said it best. He duplicates what they have. There's no reason, Tristan Thompson doesn't give them anything they don't already have with Tice. You can't play Tice and Tristan together. It doesn't work in today's NBA.
Yeah, I think when you look back at the offseason, I think it was fair for the Celtics to think they needed another center.
Sure.
And because Robert Williams, he was hurt most of last season. Yeah. The hip issue has been one that stayed with him. He's even missed a couple games with it this season. And so you wonder about his availability. You wonder if he's ready to play playoff minutes, which is what I'm sure they were concerned about and why they went after Thompson. And then the other thing, by the time Hayward left, there weren't many wings to go after. And so I think the trade exception is going to be huge for them. And then Kemba is going to be huge for them. Can he get back to at least what he was during the regular season last year? If he can do that, their offense is going to be very tough to stop. If they get that Kemba and get one shooter, scorer, whatever on the trade market. But until and unless that happens, this is going to be a team that struggles to score sometimes. And that just doesn't have, I think, the athleticism and versatility that they need.
Yeah, I just don't. I think they miss Hayward, and I wouldn't have paid him $30 million a year for 4 years. No way in hell. But they miss his ability to move the basketball. That's the problem. Like Tatum, and I love Tatum, and I actually think he's a really good passer. But like Tatum and Jalen aren't ball movers in the sense of the word. They're looking to score every time they get the basketball. They're not making life easier consistently for other guys. Gordon Hayward, he just moved the ball. He made life easier for Tatum and Jalen, and even like a Kemba now when he was on the court. And they don't have anybody like that. Kemba's still a scoring point guard. Tatum is a scorer first. Jaylen Brown is a scorer first. So I feel like that's kind of what they're missing on this team as much as anything. Yeah, they need shooters. They definitely need shooters. But they need guys that move the basketball and get easy shots, uncontested. Too many guys, they're always taking contested shots every time I watch them.
Yeah, and that was something, they've come a long way. Tatum and Brown have developed a lot in that regard. but they need somebody to set them up, and they need somebody to make things easier for them. I think you saw it to some extent with even the Clippers last year with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, where they didn't have a point guard to organize them. They didn't have a point guard to set things up. And I think that really hurt the Clippers last year. You see a similar thing with the Celtics this season, is that those two guys, yeah, they're fantastic for themselves. And yes, they can occasionally rack up 7-8 assists. They're not great playmakers yet. That's why I think Hayward leaving was a huge, huge deal.
Yep.
And Marcus Smart being out, everyone notices the defense. He's the top assist guy on the team.
He's the best passer on the team.
The way he can run a pick and roll and find open guys and kind of command that offense is something that they really miss without him, especially the way Kemba has played, where Kemba hasn't been efficient. Kemba hasn't really been able to score inside the three-point arc, which is new for him and obviously a concerning sign about how his knee is looking.
What did you make of Jason's discussion of his post-COVID physical state the other day?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by it, because obviously this is something that people deal with, and it's something that has longer effects than just the 2 weeks you have to miss. But when he says it kind of strikes you how grave this is, and it's just how hard this season has been and will be for a lot of guys.
A lot of people.
The kind of unspoken thing about all the injury issues for the Celtics, all their best players are still dealing with stuff. Like, even when they're on the court, they're dealing with stuff. Jaylen Brown has the knee tendonitis that's popped up. Tatum has had trouble, with shortness of breath after coming back from COVID. Smart's still out of the lineup. Kemba isn't even close to himself. So I think on top of the depth issues, it's the top end guys that they have all been going through it a little bit. And I'm sure the short off season didn't help at all in that regard. It certainly didn't help Kemba. And I think that's made it harder, and that's made it harder for a lot of teams. You look at some teams, they're really struggling. And obviously, like, the Lakers are one of the best teams in the league. They haven't really dealt with it, but the Heat, they're out of the playoff race right now. And they lost Jimmy Butler for a little while. So I think teams have been affected differently. The Bucks just lost 4 straight games. So especially the teams that went deeper in the playoffs, I think some of those are kind of struggling with some of the difficulties that this season in particular will provide, that really no other season in NBA history has produced.
I think the other thing that is missing on this team, and I love Kemba. Like, Kemba's the best. I mean, nobody smiles more than Kemba. Nobody's more of a class guy than Kemba, all that. But he's not a vocal leader. And Tatum isn't ready to lead yet. And Jaylen Brown isn't ready. He may think he's ready, but he's not ready to lead yet either. So they don't have a veteran leader that's vocal, especially with Marcus Smart not on the floor.
You don't think Tristan Thompson's that guy?
Yeah, I think he can be. He's just not good enough.
Yeah.
Like, he's just not good enough. I love Tristan. I think he's a great locker room guy, but I don't think he's good enough. He's not on the floor enough. You got to have, to me, like, the great teams are the ones where your leader is also one of your top 2 or 3 players. And to me, those 3 guys aren't ready. And Kemba's never going to be that. He's not going to be a vocal leader. He is super quiet. Everybody loves him. He's all about doing the right things for Tatum and Jaylen. But ultimately, yeah, I think they're missing that veteran leader as much as they're missing a shooter.
Yeah, and I struggle with that just because I do think Jaylen Brown is a good influence on guys. I do think Marcus Smart is a good influence on guys. I do think Tatum, he's as hard a worker as he gets. He's obviously a quieter force. He's not going to really light up anyone or anything like that. But yeah, I think that's kind of a struggle they've been dealing with for a little while.
And your coaches aren't, Jay, your coaching staff isn't a staff that's going to get up into guys. Like,
yeah.
And we can get into Brad now, but, like, is Brad too nice? And is his staff too nice? Like, Jay Larranaga, I don't think is that either. Jerome Allen, probably not that. Like, I think you got to have an MFer on your staff. You have it with Marcus Smart. You have it a little bit with Tristan Thompson. but I think you probably need one of those guys on your staff, and I don't think they have one.
Are you advocating to go out and hire Kevin Garnett as an assistant coach?
Absolutely. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Just, you don't have to pay him a dime. Just put him on the bench and have him jump dudes.
Just scare the life out of everybody on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's probably some of that, but I think the bigger issue with this team is honestly they just don't have, especially with Kemba playing the way he has since he got back. And you look at it, he's such a high usage guy. And he's usually a great scorer and an offensive force. And when all of a sudden his efficiency falls, he's still using a lot of possessions. He's just taking them away from Tatum, from Brown, and not being his normal self. And so I think that's really hurt, and trying to work him back in has really taken them down. Now they're, I think, 6-11 since he came back for the first time, and they were 8-3 before that. So I don't think that's all on him. Tatum has missed time, Brown's missed time. There's been Smart's missed a lot of time now, but I think part of that is that he's just not himself, and they kind of need him to be. And so maybe there is a leadership void, but I think honestly the bigger issue for this team is that they don't have enough talent with Kemba the way he is. When Tatum and Brown aren't fantastic on both ends, this team is going to struggle to win games right now.
On top of that, it seems to me that one thing that seems to have some people upset is any inference, and there have been inferences of late about lack of effort at times. And that this team, given everything you've said, if we're going to take at face value that the talent issue, you can't compound that by not putting out a maximum effort.
Yeah.
The thing. People that leads back to people. Therefore, what do they do? What's the average fan think? Point the finger at the coach.
Right.
Let's get to that. Point that they're going to say, well, the coach, we've heard that evil phrase, tune him out, has now been in the dialogue.
Yep.
Do you have any feel in your mind that has happened?
I don't think so. And I say that because when you listen to the players, there hasn't been any signs of that. Normally you can get a feel talking to the players, and it's tough. It's tough to cover a team when you're not there every day.
Right.
Well,
and it's a lot harder to get a feel for where things are. When Kyrie, during that season, when everything went wrong, you walked into the gym, you walked into the locker room, and you knew something was just off. And you could feel it. You could feel it the way guys interacted. You could feel it when you were at practice. You could just feel it that something was very wrong there. That team was not enjoying itself, was not together. It's harder for me to get a feel because I'm not there, but I would say that most of the guys, they're still echoing the things Steven said. The ball movement, he's preached ball movement. It hasn't happened, but I think that's more a factor of the players on the court. Like you said, their three best players, Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, in whatever order, are scorers. And they're not great passers, and they don't have even like a Marc Gasol type big man where you can cut and he's going to find cutters. They don't have that. They don't have really an elite pick and pop big man like a lot of teams have to space the court. And so they're missing some of the pieces of a very good offense, I think. And when you look at Stevens, I think the one thing that kind of pops out about his teams that they have consistently been missing, and I'm not sure it's all his fault. I'm pretty sure it's not all his fault, but they rarely get points in the paint. They rarely draw free throws. And that's been a pattern dating back to his first season. I think some of that is on the personnel. You look, Kyrie Irving was never a guy that sought out contact. Al Horford wasn't. So some of their best players haven't been that. But I think it's gotten to the point where it's concerning and possibly a factor of his offensive system that they don't put enough pressure on the rim and that they don't put guys in position to draw free throws and get to the free throw line and get some of those easiest points. And that, I think, has been, that would be where I would start with a criticism of Brad Stevens if I were looking at this Celtics team.
You know, I think part of the problem again is you've got a system that's so reliant on shooting the three, and you don't have great three-point shooters. You don't have enough of them. Like, you've got streaky, some guys who can make threes, like Jalen at times can make that corner three consistently, but he's not a great shooter. You know, like Kemba's not a great shooter. We know that. He's been streaky his whole life. You know, last 3 games, he's been pretty good from three. Before that, no, he was obviously he's coming back from the injury. So I think part of the problem for me is Brad Stevens, honestly, unwillingness a little bit to adapt and say, my personnel doesn't fit necessarily the style that I want to play and have played. So I've got to change a little bit, and we're not going to jack as many threes.
But here's the thing: if you don't jack threes, what do you do? Because they don't have a great like post up for. They don't have a Joel Embiid to be a half court offense where they're going to throw it into. Like, you don't want to do that with Tristan Thompson. You don't want to do that with Daniel Tice. You don't want to do it with Robert Williams.
You got to try to get up and down now that you've Kemba. You got to try to get up and down.
Yeah, and the pace, that's another thing that you look at the stats, and their pace is very slow. And their 3 best players, again, Kemba, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they're all guys that should be out in transition, should be out making plays.
Yep.
And I think it'll make things easier when they do. But then again, like, they're playing too big a lot of the time because they don't have any backup lanes. And we've seen this. He started last night Javonte Green and Shemi Ojeleye. And
amazing.
And he's started Carson Edwards. He has started a bunch of guys. He started Jeff Teague. He starts guys.
It goes back to what you started with, Jay. It goes back ultimately your first comments where there's not enough talent around the top 3 guys. And number 3 right now isn't really what he normally is. So I agree. I think you have to wait, judge him when Kemba gets healthy, probably after the All-Star break is when it's fair to judge this team. But, you know, is some of this on Danny Ainge? Obviously, because he's put this team together, Bob. And right now they don't look like they fit. And they certainly don't look like they fit with the way that Brad Stevens wants to play.
And he did own up. Basically, you know, I mean, if you take it at face value, you know, I'm just saying he opened up and he was asked the questions by and the Herald headline was blame me, and you know, so he's saying it, okay, but it's all adds up to every individual fan's patience quotient, you know, a realistic measure, whatever, you know, and it's too much is always hanging out there with the Boston Celtics about championship driven and all that. And I shudder when I hear that nonsense because there's so many variables that go into winning, as we all know. You know, I love pointing out certain teams have been in this league 50 years have never won. You know, for example, the Atlanta Hawks, St. Louis won in 58 and the Hawks haven't won since. You know, that's a long time, folks. And they've had some pretty good teams along the way at times, not this one, but they've had some, you know, and we can find other examples of teams that have never won. You know, it's 50, we're in the 51st year of the incarnation of the Buffalo Braves, San Diego Clippers, Los Angeles Clippers. You know, they're looking for number 1, and this is their 52nd year of existence. It isn't easy to win, folks.
It's not.
And you gotta. And the Celtics have been historically very lucky about certain opportune things that happen. The opportunity to get Bill Russell, the opportunity to get Dave Cowens. When they fit 1 win difference between them and the Cincinnati Royals, and they might not have gotten Dave Cowens. Okay, and of course, Bird, you know, turning out to be even better than anyone ever dreamed, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. Anyway, so I'm saying is I'm patient. I'm not greedy. I'm just like with the Red Sox. I don't want to hear all this nonsense about the Red Sox. You know, 4 championships since 2004. I'm a happy camper, okay? I don't expect to win every year. But people's expectations sometimes get, to me, you know, too, you know, just too grandiose.
Yep.
I'm not ready to, I'm disappointed. I don't, you know, I hate it. I watched that game last night. It wasn't enjoyable. You know what I mean? As a basketball fan, it wasn't, well, what was enjoyable was watching Trae Young. That was enjoyable.
Well, he
As a
is
basketball
fun to
fan,
watch.
I mean, boy, I mean, I've been on his case since I saw him in Oklahoma the first time. I remember he had one 37-point game one day that was phenomenal, something. And I've been a fan of his, but that's enjoyable. You know, nice to have a player like that, you know. Well, we've had our share over the years. That's all I'm saying. And one more thing, Jay, talk about the not getting to the free throw line, which has definitely been the truth the whole time. You know, we hear about this every year. But when Tatum was a rookie, wasn't the most overtly wonderful thing about him was the way he got to the basket with that incredible first step, I thought. And I just still think that ought to be the number one thing in his game.
Yeah, and I think it's been harder for him since then because, I mean, if you look at that team, everyone was loading up on Kyrie Irving. Everyone was loading up on Al Horford, and he was the third option.
Yeah, you're right.
It's gotten progressively tougher on him. And now instead of, you know, attacking closeouts and being single covered all the time, he's got a full defense looking at him. And I think that's another piece where the lack of shooting hurts. The Celtics, I think they're near they're in the bottom 10 of the league in 3-point attempts, even though Tatum and Brown have shot fantastically from behind the arc. And it just shows you there's not enough spacing on the court. And so I think if they could get another shooter, another 2 shooters, that would really help those guys. And
well,
I think
they drafted Nesmith, and it still might happen. I mean, you know, it's with him, of course. I mean, my God, we're talking 2 months in his career, 3 months in his career. Not saying, but it's what that's right. They did something that they seldom do, and which is drafted for a need.
Right.
That was a need. Turns out that the benefit they're getting from the draft is the other guy, which has been a very pleasant bonus, as you said. And I just think he's going to continue to get better and better. I just don't see why he won't, as he has a feel for the league as time goes on. And Pritchard won't be I think he's going to be a solid player for a long time. I really.
Yeah, I like Pritchard a lot. I mean, like I said earlier, and like you said, their bench would be really lost without him. He's been that important, and I think that's kind of shows you how little they've gotten from some of their other pieces, especially Teague. But yeah, Nesmith, I think his energy has been fantastic. He's out there and he gives the energy that sometimes it seems like the team is missing right now. He's diving on the floor, he's hustling everywhere. Yeah. Doesn't really know what's going on yet. The game still needs to slow down for him. He still needs to find that shot, and I think he will find that shot. You talk to guys from when he was in high school, from when he was in college, and they just talk about how ridiculous a shooter he is. So I think that'll come along. I think the defense that he's shown, the energy he's shown is actually pretty promising.
I mean,
here's a quote. Can I read you a quote from a player that played the Celtics recently? I'm going to read you a couple quotes. I'm not going to say who it was, obviously. But I was asking him last night a little bit of his thoughts of the Celtics. And he said, Tatum and Brown can't be your superstars and only do things that help their game. They don't get anyone else easy shots. All they know how to do is score. Doesn't help the Kemba. Kemba doesn't help their center. They don't help anyone either. They don't turn down tough shots to get another guy an easy shot. So teams are onto them. That's basically what he said. Teams are onto them, load up on those 2 and live with them taking long 2s. And that's what you're seeing. Like, again, like you said, Jay, what are they doing? Tatum gets by one guy. He's got 2 more waiting for him. Same thing.
That was
with
a
Jalen.
good scouting report. Whoever you were talking to, that was a smart scouting report.
Well, it's not that hard to figure, right? It's not that hard to figure, but to hear it from a player that played against them, that knows them, that obviously they had a scouting report going into that game, it's pretty easy. All right, let's get to. I want to lighten it up a little bit. We've been, negative here on the Celtics for the first 30 minutes of this. We'll end with a few minutes on Jay King's. How many years now you've been covering the Celtics?
8 or 9 full time, and then a couple years before that part time for a few different publications.
So, give me your favorite, greatest, funniest, coolest story since covering the Celtics.
Man, but this one's about Bob, honestly. So my first game covering the Celtics, I had never covered a high school game before. I had never covered a college game before. I had never covered a soccer game, a football game, anything. I had started a blog in college about the Celtics because I had to start a blog for a class, and I said, "What the hell? I love the Celtics. I'll just write about them." And one thing led to another. Some paper from Connecticut asked me to cover a game, and I think I was a junior or senior in college. And I got to the game. I thought I was going to be so starstruck to meet the players. And I remember Kevin McHale was doing the game, and I walked by Kevin McHale, and I was like, wow, holy shit, this is real. Like I said, I had no journalistic background. I had no idea really what the hell I was doing. And so I walked by Kevin McHale. I say, wow, this is crazy. But I'm not really starstruck. I kind of expected stuff like that. Walk in the locker room, talk to Kevin Garnett, talk to Paul Pierce, talk to whoever. Still not starstruck, kind of doing my job. I know what I'm there to do. I meet Bob, and I see Bob in the media room, and I start sweating, man. And Bob, this might embarrass you to hear this, but I started sweating, man. And I remember I walked over and introduced myself, and at some point, I guess when I fell in love with sports writing, it transitioned for me from being starstruck of the players to being starstruck of the writers that I appreciated so much when I was growing up, and kind of shaped the way I viewed sports writing. So I walked over and I was shaking when I introduced myself to you, and it was really just an incredible moment for me. And that's probably one of the cooler moments that I've had covering the team. And man, it's an honor to be on the podcast with you and to share this story with you.
Well, that's very nice of you to say that. I don't even know how to respond to that, except thank you very much. But what I did relate to as you were speaking, talking about the awe of, the McHale and so forth. And I've told this story many times. My very first game covering was the opening night of the 69-70 season against the Cincinnati Royals. And after the game, I'm in the locker room doing the rounds, making my rounds, and I'm in with the Royals. And while in the midst of one particular interview, I had this, it hit me. And I went, oh my God, I'm talking to Oscar Robertson. Serious. I was so far in over my head in that, and it was so, yeah. I mean, I'll never forget that. Oh my God, I'm talking to Oscar Robertson. I have no right to talk to Oscar Robertson. You know what I'm saying? So I remember that was my first.
So I got a question for you. One thing, a lot of sports writers get jaded and kind of, I think, lose the joy for the game. How did you keep the joy for the game, being around it all the time, and as it became a job and what you did every day? How did you kind of keep that joy for the game and the enthusiasm for it?
I can only answer that for some reason in my DNA, I've never lost my fascination or curiosity about games, winning and losing, competition, no matter what the competition involves. And I that's why when people, I go in this soapbox about so often you hear guys say, well, I don't care who wins and loses. And anyway, I just want to write about people. And I say, okay, fine. I understand that, but that's the layup drill. If you can't write about people, you're not a proper writer to start with. But if it weren't for the games, why would we care about these people? Yeah. So to me, it's got to be rooted in your interest in liking the game. And I'm interested in all kinds of basketball. I fell in love with international basketball. The last couple of years up to this year, I got hooked on Hingham High School girls basketball, because they had a 4'10" point guard who knew how to play, Grace Bennis, and that kind of sparked something in me about I really loved watching her play. So I'm still fascinated about that. And as Jeff knows, I have been to 201 venues to see college basketball games.
I don't believe it's 201, but we won't get into it. He counts things that I don't personally sign off on him counting these venues.
Anything, Jay, it's an undercount. Don't worry.
I think it's inflated.
But anyway, to your question, I'm lucky that it's just natural, just who I am. My motivation was still the games, and ultimately, and they happen to be played by people, yeah. But see, most people, as they go along, they flip flop it, and I never hit me, and I'll be, That's just the answer. Just DNA.
Speaking of games,
that's a great gift, man. That's a great gift and it comes across in your writing. It always did, and I think that's one of the things that really separated you. So that it really is just a gift to be able to do that and to be able to share that with everyone.
Well, I'm grateful for it, believe me, because I don't have any skills, marketable skills that have to do with anything to do with mechanics or working with your hands, as they say.
Shovel snow well. You're good at shoveling snow, Bob.
I can shovel, yeah.
You've done a lot of that lately. Hey, Jay, what's it been like? I haven't been to a game since Mohegan Sun. I went the first 4 days in college, and believe it or not, like there were 3 of us they allowed, and we were like, I don't know. Listen, 3-4 feet away with masks on, coaches, with players. It was awesome. And since then, I haven't been to a game. I actually got cleared to go this week. Bob, I haven't told you this. With my daughter, we're cleared. If I want to go to the Bryant Merrimack game, we can go sit in the stands, whatever. I'm waiting for my wife to sign off, to be honest. But what is it like for you covering? Have you been to every home game so far? What have you done?
So I haven't gone to any home game, and I just made a personal decision. They're not letting media anywhere near the locker room, anywhere near players. It's all on Zoom calls anyway. So I just made a personal decision to stay away and work from home, just because I want to see my parents. I want to be able to go see my girlfriend's parents, and I wouldn't have felt comfortable, being around as many people as I would have at the games and then go seeing my parents. So I've just kind of been working from home, and if there was any benefit at all to going to the arena, I would go.
Yeah,
but there really isn't right now. So I've kind of stayed away.
It's so, Jay, it's so unimaginable to me. It's almost unimaginable to the people who are still working, but it's unimaginable to me when I think about the access that I had, literally 50 years ago.
Yeah, I'm jealous of that stuff, man.
I mean, sitting in the locker room an hour and a half before the game at practice. And all the stuff that you did, and that's unavailable to you guys now, and it's so sad, and the ultimate losers, the reader, or the viewer, the reader, the people that we're servicing in the media, that we can't bring the good stuff, the really great stuff. It's a shame.
It's been so much harder. And we talk all the time, the writers and I, about just how we're doing the worst work we're working harder than ever and still doing the worst work of our careers, because I even missed, they let us watch 15 minutes of practice when during normal times. It's normally just you go in and you watch guys stretch or you watch guys shoot around. And I used to wonder, why do they let us watch the most useless 15 minutes? And the amount you can pick up in that 15 minutes, whether it's one player working with a coach on this skill or the way guys interact, who they're friends with, you can pick up so much stuff just by watching. And now we can't watch any of that anymore. And so it really has been very difficult.
You never retrieved basketballs for Larry Bird after the practice was over, or retrieved for Kevin while Kevin was showing you a move he said that he can't make in the game because it's not a travel, but the referees will think it's a travel? I mean, you weren't doing that?
Can't say I ever did that, but Kyrie Irving did kick me out of the locker room one time.
He did?
Not really. He tried to kick us all out of the locker room one day.
Hey,
like 10 minutes before media was supposed to be over.
Do you remember that year? I came into the locker room. I don't remember. I came to a game early in the season, and I think I warned you before the season even started about Kyrie. And I remember this conversation kind of vividly. And I was like, I'm like, how has he been so far? And you're like, he's been great. And I think I asked you and maybe a couple other guys, and you guys were all like, he's been great. And I'm like, just give it time. Just give it time. Wait till I come back again in a month or so, and I'll ask you then, and we'll see how it goes. And like maybe 2 weeks later, you guys were still like, no, he's been good. And then it was again, and you guys are like, yeah, I kind of see what you're saying now.
Yeah, there was a few month grace period, and then,
then there's a honeymoon with Kyrie. there's definitely a honeymoon period, but eventually Kyrie goes Kyrie, and you know what?
Yeah, and
I've talked about him a lot, but
he matures, right? And you've seen it before. Like, I think Rajon Rondo was very difficult when he was younger in his career.
yes.
And you look at him, I think his leadership was very important to the Lakers.
Right.
And
Totally.
you look at
He's
his
grown up.
leadership in Chicago, the young guys, they basically worshipped him, it seemed like, in Chicago. And so some guys do grow up and do mature, and you hope that Kyrie can do that and find happiness, really, because I think finding happiness in basketball has been very tough for him.
Well, Jay, you know what I always say about him? I think he's searching for something in life. He doesn't know what it is. And, you know, he's not an evil person. He's just a very complicated one, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it comes out in different ways sometimes.
Well, listen, we appreciate you joining us. We appreciate you getting all dressed up, and I like your background there, buddy.
Yeah,
background's nice.
Yeah, I'm actually at my parents' house, so they still got the Christmassy stuff up. You know, you gotta tis the season.
I like it. It's big time. Maybe you should have them decorate your house.
I don't think so, man. I don't think they want that.
Well, they'd have to come in and clean it up. They'd have to clean up all your dirty laundry on the floor. I mean, listen, I'm sure your mom did this plenty when you were younger. She doesn't need to be doing it again.
All the leftover pizza still stuck in the body. Yeah, they don't want to do that.
They do not. Listen, we appreciate it, man. Good seeing you. Hopefully we'll see you in person. I don't know. Will you go in for the playoffs, or you're opting out for the whole year?
At some point, I'll probably go back if the vaccine gets better. And I assume stuff like that will happen as we get further into this season. So yeah, I'll probably go back at some point. Just for now, I want to be able to be safe seeing my parents and seeing everybody else. Smart move.
All right, there you have it. Jay King from The Athletic. Thanks for joining us, Jay.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun, guys.